Hello, I'm here with my reaction and opinions about Canada Reads Day 2 for 2017. I thought about commenting on some of the personal attacks, the underhanded remarks, the bitterness, etc. that we're seeing from a few of the contestants, but I don't want to, so if you want to talk about that, we can talk about it in the comments, but because I wish the contenders would just talk about the books instead of personal attacks and such like that, I'm going to reflect that in my own video. And as Humble said, and as I tweeted an hour before Humble said, so I'm saying he's quoting me. You gotta remember that this isn't about what issue is more important. This is about what book best conveys their issue in the best way. Yeah. So the first thing I want to talk about is the book that was voted off, Nostalgia by M.G. Vizanji, defended by Jodi Middick. And I really appreciated Jodi's arguments about socioeconomics being a unifying force that transcends racism and sexism and ableism and all this other horrible things that go on. It's once you're poor, that's kind of something everyone can experience. It's very universal, regardless of these outlying factors. And I think that's a very important issue that not a lot of people are talking about, is the wage gap, because a lot of people, especially on Canada Reads and especially among readers, tend to be middle upper class, and you know, as some of them said, you know, it's easy to ignore things that are there, to ignore poverty in your community and such, because you don't think it's your fault. But that's, I'm not saying it's anybody's fault, but I'm thinking it is a real issue that we really need to address and talk about. And because I know from previous year experiences that a lot of you are going to take this out of context and take it personally, I want to say, you know, people that need your hands being held, and you have your little echo chamber and you're going to disagree, that I want to acknowledge that historically this kind of discrimination, about discrimination, racism, sexism, ableism, has been a factor in contributing these people to being poor. But these factors no longer mean in our modern day that you have to be poor. Let's see if I can put that. These factors are no longer a death sentence. There are people of color, there are single females, there are disabled people who are not poor, but socioeconomic class doesn't discriminate in that manner. The circumstances that have historically led to these types of people being poor may be caused by discrimination, but once there, everyone has the same struggles. It goes to Maslow's hierarchy. When you're poor, you have to worry first about your physical well-being. You have to worry about food, water, shelter, staying healthy, before you worry about the bigger issues, about jobs and about education and about self-actualization, and whether racism or sexism or ableism is hindering you. And the socioeconomic, I think what Jodi was trying to say is that everyone experiences it. White people experience it, black people experience it, indigenous people experience it, males experience it, females experience it, you know, everyone experiences poverty. So I think that's what he meant, that it kind of levels the playing field. Once you are poor, it is really hard to get out of there. And I know there's a big history behind it, but I don't want to, like, talk for an hour about what leads to poverty. But I think that was a very important issue that needs to be brought up, that we need to deal with the poor in our country. That's one thing that really bugs me about Justin Trudeau, is that he's always about, like, working on the middle class. Well, what about those poor people? You know, let's work on getting them out of poverty and, you know, into at least working class. You know, let's, you know, be able to afford houses and afford cars and afford education. So I think that was part of Nostalgia that I really liked, was seeing that juxtaposition of the haves and have-nots. I wish it was better done, but that's a different story. And then a big thing that was brought up was the issues of gender and gender representation. the tone was kind of set in the first one when they were talking about men, but I want to talk more about women because I already talked about how those arguments are not legitimate concerns within the books. I think Humble's been picked upon a lot. 15 Dogs have been picked on about a lot, underhandedly, so by Candy, but Humble has put forward that, you know, the one female representation that we have in there is actually very positive. Nira is a very positive influence, a very good representation of women, a very positive influence of women. I think Misha's, the character of Hua has also been quite bombarded with the, oh, she's only strong because she's like a man. But I think that speaks to patriarchy as well. I think Misha has very well defended this book about, and the character of Hua as a powerful female character. People are stuck on this idea that physical strength is just a male characteristic, but physical strength can be a female characteristic. I mean, if you look at what our bodies do as females, you know, creating and going through the pain of labor, that requires a lot of physical strength. So I think her being a martial artist has nothing to do with being a male trait, but is actually a female trait. But it's also not just her physical strength. It is also her mental and her emotional strength. You know, if you look at what she's been through in this book, and Misha has pointed this out quite well, is that, you know, she's witnessing her friends being murdered. She is forced to sell her body as much as the sex workers. She is, you know, comes from a history of abuse in her family. She's lost her brother. She has lost an abuse. And to see these people that she's created as a family unit being taken away from her so violently, to be able to emotionally withstand that is amazing. An astounding thing for anyone to really go through. And then to still be emotionally open. It just would be so easy for Hua to just go into herself and just emotionally close everyone off, because everyone she has loved has left her or hurt her or has been taken from her. And I think that's a really important point to be made. So I think I am kind of upset that Nostalgia was voted off. It was a little bit higher up on my list, but what can you do? So I'll see you for tomorrow's reaction.